Blues in Stereo is a collection of select early works, all written before the age of 25, in which we see Langston Hughes with fresh eyes. From the intimate pages of his handwritten journals, you will travel with Hughes outside of Harlem as he ventures to the American South in Mexico, sails through the Caribbean, and becomes the only Harlem Renaissance poet to visit Africa. His poems and journal entries celebrate love as a tool of liberation. His songs showcase the musicality of verse poetry, and the collection even includes a play he co-wrote with Duke Ellington with a full score that experiments with rhythm and structure. This collection portrays a young man coming of age in a changing world. Page by page, a young, fresh-faced Hughes contends with matters beyond his years with raw talent, and by keeping his original handwritten notations found in archival material, we get to witness a genius's early thought process in real time. National Book Award nominated poet Danez Smith offers their insight and notes on themes, challenges, and obsessions that Hughes' early work contains. Beautifully rendered and thoughtfully curated, Blues in Stereo foreshadows a master poet that will go on to define literature for centuries to come. And now a little bit about Danez Smith. Danez Smith, they, them, is the author of four poetry collections, including Bluff, Homie, and Don't Call Us Dead. Danez has won the Forward Prize for Best Collection, the Minnesota Book Award in Poetry, the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry, and has been a finalist for the NAACP Image Award in Poetry, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the National Book Award. Danez lives in Minneapolis with their people. And now I'll pass it off to them. Thank you.
Listen. What? How y'all doing? Good. I kind of love when it's like a small. I have to hold the mic as well, or can I just be loud? Can the live stream, if I feel like I'm picking up in the room, can the live stream raise your hand if you can hear me without having to hold it in my hand the whole time? Let's see what y'all say. Okay. I'm theater trained. I think I tight. Hello, y'all. Well, welcome to everybody on the live stream. If you can hear me, that's good. Welcome to everybody here. I really love these intimate shows like this one because I get paid or not paid the same way. I think it's like a chance. The energy's a little different. And it's always a good time to be at Busboys. So thank you, Madison and Busboys, for having me. I run the gamut of shows here, like really incredible shows, really like small, beautiful shows. And I think the only time I was dangerously close to getting booed off stage was on the Busboys and Poets on the Maryland side. Oh yeah. It was like what? It was 2012, and I don't think we was quite ready for how homosexual I was back then. And I did this poem that I think Langston Hughes would like about screwing somebody's husband and getting paid for it. And the straights were not feeling it. I tried to do a Jesus poem to get him back on my side. It didn't work. But glad to be here tonight in all the queerness and blackness that is discussion about what's to be. Although we can argue about the queerness, I don't really know. We can talk. So for this, I thought we'd do a couple things. And one is like so small and intimate that even, oh wow, she was right. That thing is loud. I thought that, well, one, if you have a question, this is like labeled as a discussion. So if you got a tidbit to add, a bit to ask, or whatever it is in the middle of it, just throw up a hand and a voice and say, hey, we can do it that way. I actually feel weird being up here in the chair. I like the chair, but I feel like I should be like a cool teacher on the steps right now. But I don't think we set up for that. Anyways, so feel free to throw up a hand. The other way is I worked on Bluff, which is my most recent poetry collection that came out in August. Alongside, I was like crossing the finish line on Bluff at the same time that I was building Blues and Stereo. And I think they share a lot of energies. There's some poems where I'm thinking directly about Langston at certain moments. Also, side note, I don't know why I feel comfortable calling him by his first name. His name is Hughes. You don't know the name. So I feel The last couple times I've done this by myself without a conversation partner. I've just been kind of going back and forth between the two to talk about both books and to also because just to show how so much of what Langston's thinking about is still relevant with us today. I think one thing that happened with me while working on Blues and Stereo was I realized very quickly how small we are within time, and how small the gap between the poems that Langston's writing and the poems that and us reading them right now. It's like such a small space of history, right? Yes, it's several generations, it's 100 years or something like that, right? But 100 years is nothing in the grand scale of the time. There are many ways in which the hopes and desires and the disasters and the perils of 100 years ago are still the same things we're dealing with today, right? And I think we have this tendency to say, oh my God, I didn't realize like this poem that feels so old to us is so relevant. Why does it feel like that? Well, one, because poems are all kind of circling the same things: love, war, sex, hope, despair, all these things. But also because 100 years is really nothing in the grand human scale. I think because we're Americans, we think it's a long time. And surely a lot has happened in the last 100 years. But Langston is writing, when he's at his most urgent about the lives of black people and poor people in this country, right? A hope and a necessity for justice that is still very much alive today. And so, of course, these poems, feel like they collapse a century's worth of time to meet us in our urgency for today. So in that way, we'll kind of use Langston's urgencies and his curiosities as a way to just make our way through some poems. I'm just gonna read a bunch of poems and then we'll chat some shit. I don't know, y'all want any questions, comments, concerns? Y'all ready to go? I feel like it's a workshop size. We could all introduce ourselves. Okay, never mind. I ain't gonna do that. Cool. I'm gonna start with one of just Langston's poems that I think has been on my mind a lot since the election, because I felt a lot of people around me feeling very shook by the election, and I felt very steadfast and clear-eyed about it a little bit. I was like, of course he won, and it's not like it would have been dancing in the street if it would have been the other direction either. But what I saw was, from watching people like my husband, who's an immigrant, or my mom and my grandma, who were so upset about the election, older black women. There was this thing of realizing that, yeah, we still very much are waiting on something to come, right? Which maybe is what also collapses that time, right? A lot of people like to act like history happened, and like we made it to that great someday that so many of our ancestors and elders were praying for and marching for, when there's still a desire for someplace else. So this is one of the latest poems that I've been calling on a lot, just to remember that there's still a lot more down the road. Our land. We should have a land of sun, of gorgeous sun, and a land of fragrant water, where the twilight is a soft bandana handkerchief of rose and gold, and not this land where life is cold. We should have a land of trees, of tall, thick trees, bowed down with chattering parrots, brilliant as the day, and not this land where birds are gray. We should have a land of joy, of love and joy and wine and song, and not this land where joy is wrong. Oh, sweet away. My beloved one, away. I love that poem, especially that last away. It's almost like he's telling us that the land we should have is not here. We gotta go elsewhere. Interesting question for Lex. All right, I'm gonna read one of his most famous poems, probably one of the most famous poems in the English language. And then a poem of mine that kind of responds to it, or at least includes a moment of it. He wrote The Negro Speaks of Rivers when he was 18 years old, headed down to Mexico to ask who just graduated from college, to ask his father for money that he would use to go to college. He wrote it on the back of an envelope, right, on this train, looking out the window and seeing the Mississippi. And I think it's really incredible to me that this 18-year-old, I'm 35 now. That's a child to me. So this child, this budding man, um, wrote what would become one of the most anthologized, one of the most critically, investigated poems in the American canon. Um, just on his way somewhere else, right? Just because he looked out the window, and I'm reminded of the brilliance of poetry when I think about that, right? How a brief moment of witnessing an interaction can be something historical. Um, it's a call for us poets and us makers to say, never doubt even the smallest bit of information, right? You never know what that is going to mean to somebody else if you follow it. Yeah, so this is the Negro Speaks of Rivers. It's also interesting to me because this poem is so wise and so knowing and so, the body of it is so huge. And he 18. What he know? What does he know? That was also collapsed time working on these Langston Hughes poems, and he's such a visionary hero to me to spend so much time in the poems when he was far younger than the age of my students, right? All right, let's read this poem. The Negro Speaks of Rivers. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood and human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. And I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like rivers. Thank you, Langston. Also, Langston is imbued in this. I just have to shout out. I realized we're in Busboys and Poets, which is named after the man. But earlier, right, I was just thinking about this poem going around the room, if you would. Let America be America again. And I love it if you look in the middle of the room about where my homie in the yellow hat is sitting, or maybe in the gray hat. Maybe it's by him. I can't see up here with these lights. But there's a part of it that's in parentheses, right? America was never America to me. And I love that he snuck that into a poem that people think is very patriotic and call upon when we need to believe in the nation, right? Let America be America again. America was never America, which sounds very MAGA if you think about what that's saying, but then that interruption, right? The realness underneath it. America was never America to me. That relates a lot to this poem, I think, that I'm about to read from my own work. I think at one point, I think I've always hated America, but I think during the presidency, or during the, I'm black, during the campaign of Barack Obama, I think I very much fell for the okie doke. Very much fell for the promise that was in a lot of the messaging that we had around Obama, right? It was his face plastered in red, white, and blue with words like change and hope behind it, right? And so very much, I think, fell for what America could be under this promise. It's a black guy, right? He's African. What can go wrong? And, some good things happen, sure, all things considered, but, he continued to make chaos all over the world, like every U.S. president. And so this poem, I think it's about Langston in two ways. One, I think it follows in that what's happened in that parentheses, America was never America to me. Two, it mentions a river in the middle of it, which in my head is the very river, like we're in the. So, just like the Negro Speaks of Rivers, there's a mention of Abe Lincoln in it. So where I went to college, there's a hill called Baskin Hill that's mentioned in the poem. At the top of the hill, there's a statue of Abe Lincoln. And when Barack won, we all left our dorms and our apartments and flooded this hill and danced around this statue of Abe Lincoln. Yeah. Last Black American poem.
Voted for the Negro twice. Twice my captor wore my face. Admit it, Danez, you loved your master in your shade. Yes, I loved knowing the color at the end of my chain matched mine. Wrong river. It wasn't chains, it was water when one of us helmed the boat. Water for our eyes, water raised to the lips of cargo. Still cargo. In summer, we turned down that Jeezy, learning a new one slang name, the helm, and still the boat, still headed to Carolina shores. My president was black when mothers got millions in exchange for sons. Michelle's perm was perfect as bombs dropped in the middle of childhoods. We buried my grandpa with an Obama button pinned to his lapel. Finally free, we sent him to heaven, American. When he won, we sprinted Bascom Hill and danced like happy slaves at Lincoln's feet. We were happy-ass slaves, happy to vote, happy to be able to protest the killing we couldn't end, happy for health care that killed us slower, happy the gays could marry in a country. Happy our wars were only of the mind, only elsewhere. Forgive me, I wrote odes to presidents. Thank you. All right, switch my order. That's a better transition. So, I think, right, that last note of, like, forgive me, I wrote odes to presidents, right? I think throughout Langston's career, you see him, I think he's a great balancer when you look at his work, right, and understanding sort of all the nuance and complexities of the situation, right? So I think, one, in the book, you can also see as, like, kind of progresses a little bit chronologically, but at least by the back half of the book is a lot about his travels and a lot of poems that he wrote when he was a sailor in a way. What I love about those is that you see his already critical and clear vision of America change even more, because he's understanding global blackness in a different way as he's traveling and going to the Caribbean and going to Africa, and, you know, seeing how black folks are living in all these different conditions that are different than his in America, but also reminds him of Harlem, reminds him of the South, reminds him of what he's seen in DC. So yeah, so there's a lot that's happening in his mind. One poem in particular, published in the Crisis, which was the NAACP's literary magazine, that didn't make its way into his first book, is this poem called Minstrel Man. It's really short, but I love it because even thinking about how Langston was nuanced, right? Langston did a lot of things that we'll talk about, but, like, he was very much a champion of black people, right? He looked at black folks that were living in whatever condition they were, right? In a time when, you know, some of his direct mentors, you know, were playing around with ideas of talented tips and stuff like that, right? And really just thinking about wanting to push forward an upper echelon of blackness. Langston refused such a limited idea of what our liveliness and our forwardness could look like, right? It was very Booker T with him saying, like, I want to look at the folks at the bottom as well, who would not become the intellectuals. But he also, in this poem, right, I think for somebody as pro-black as Langston, it would have been very easy to dismiss somebody who had a more poisonous relationship to the blackness, right? Like in this poem where he's talking about a black person who does blackface, right? Is a minstrel performer. You know, whether with the paint or not, it's still blackface. You know, I think it would have been very easy to dismiss that person for such a black, pro-black person as Langston, but his love extends even to those black folks, right, that are in a compromised position. So it's a short poem, and then I'm gonna read a poem of mine that I think echoes a little bit. This is Minstrel Man. Because my mouth is wide with laughter, and my throat is deep with song. You don't think I suffer. Oh, you don't think I suffer after. I have held my pain so long. Because my mouth is wide with laughter, you don't hear my inner cry. Because my feet are gay with dancing, you don't know I died. I love that one. I've been thinking, as I was writing Bluff, I was thinking about my own minstrelsies. Just like what it is to be a Black artist in the current day, especially when my career first started to take off. Like the poems of mine that made it real big, that kind of changed my financial situation, were poems that were very much written in the spirit of liberation and wanting a better day for Black folks, right? And there's a very complicated and sickening thing that happens when you're like, I want to be free, stop killing my people, and somebody says, yeah, here's some money. Right, come say that over here. And it can be beautiful to spread that message and all that other kind of stuff, right? But there's a way in which colonialism and capitalism learns to incorporate even the people that would call for its destruction or call for liberation from that same system and finds a way to wrap them in its arms, make them another puppet. So I had a lot of complicated feelings, and I talked to my therapist a lot, and I also wrote this poem. Here it is. It's called Less Hope. Apologies. I was part of the Joy Industrial Complex. Told them their bodies were miracles and they ate it up. Sold someday. Made money off soon and now. Snuck an ode into the elegy. Forced the dead to smile and juke. Implied America, said destroy, but offered nary step nor tool. Paid taxes, knowing where the funds go. In April, offerings to my mother's slow murder. By May, my sister filled with the bullets I bought. The June and my father's life locked in a box I built. My brothers in plotted as I spared. IDKY, I told you it would be okay. Not, won't. When they aren't killing you, they're killing someone else. Sometimes their hands at the end of your wrist. You, meaning you and me, are agent and enemy. There I was, writing anthems in a nation whose victory was my blood made visible. Mama, too sugar to weep without melting. My rage fed their comfort, foaming at my racial mouth, singing gospel for a God they beat me into loving. Lord, your tomorrow holds no sway. Your heaven too late. I abandon you as you did me. Say la vie. But sweet Satan, OG dark kicked out the sky. First fallen and niggered thing. What's good? Who owns it? Where it come from? Satan, first segregation, mother of exile. What you promised in your fire. For a real freedom, I offer over their souls. Theirs, mine's is mine's. I refuse any hell again. I've known near doubles, the audience and the mirror. They make you look weak. They clapped at my eulogies. They said, encore, encore. We wanted to stop being killed, and they thanked me for beauty. And pitifully, I loved them. I thanked them. I took the awards and cashed the checks. I did the one about the boy when requested, traded their names for followers. In lieu of action, I wrote a book, edited my war cries down to prayers. Oh, devil. They gave me God and gave me clout. They took my poems and took my blades. Satan, like you did for God, I sang. I sang for my enemy, who was my God. I gave it my best. I bowed, and worse, smiled. Teach me to never bend again. All right. Where we go after that? Yeah. Yeah, let's tell you. Yeah, you got a question? What's up? Yeah. Or a saying? You want to say something? What's up? Okay, you have a question. What's up?
The last poem. Who would you say you were addressing that to?
Okay, for the question for folks on the live stream was for the last poem, who was I addressing that to? Myself. I think I take poems at their value, right? So I think at that point where I turn the poem to Satan, I'm really talking to Satan, but also talking to ideas. There's also another line somewhere else in the book is why did we spend so long trying to live up to goodness when goodness has not saved us, right? So I think Satan there also represents the scary things that you shouldn't say out loud, or I don't know, maybe more violent impulses, more shame impulses, right? I think Satan is not as sort of bad in that, right? But it's thinking about how do I embrace what my enemy tells me I should be against, right? I'll say that. I feel like I'm in DC, everything's wild, and I'll let them interpret that. And then I guess also you can see it as addressing two different audiences. I think one is addressing sort of a white audience that is imagining publication. But I think that is one that really I don't draw a lot of power from addressing a lot lately. I do it. Sometimes I try to be intentional. And so maybe not addressed to, but I think part of what that poem and a lot of what Bluff is doing is I'm really trying to save a younger generation of artists time. And being let me just kind of be unmasked a little bit about my own sort of things that I wrestled with. And hopefully hearing me talk about these sort of tensions between what your art is for and making a life from your art. Because those things do, sometimes stand in contingency, right? I want to call for the end of capitalism, and I need to make money in capitalism with these little poems too, right? I need a grant. So just try to I think play out those tensions for other people who might relate to them. So, but I think the first addressee is it's kind of that opening is very to the public, right? Apologies to who? To everybody, to my work, to myself, to the future, to the past, whoever, right? Very much anybody. That was a long way to say everybody. Sorry. Any other? Yeah, what's up?
I'm curious about where you're at now in terms of really the black artist and what the goal of the black artist is. If there's been when reading a poem or when reflecting on a poem, have your thoughts or ideas changed in any way? Or is there a different understanding in this moment of what the black artist?
Yeah, I think for me, the black artists, I think Langston would have a lot to say about this. Actually, there's a quote. I should just read it. Well, this doesn't really get to it, but I think a great essay of Langston's to read is The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, which is available. That is really loud when it kicks in. It just sounds like a spaceship taking the hell off. So in that essay, he's really even the quote that I use in the book, right? It's about, he's ashamed for poets, he's sad for poets who would say they're not a black poet, they're just a poet, right? And for him to be a black poet is a great thing, right? Because it is, there's an act of service, right? Even though, and I tend to agree, right? I think about the black artists, and people who would invite themselves into, the big community that is a part of that. I think there is a call to go beyond art for art's sake, although I love art for art's sake, right? I love art that is sort of, you know, obsessed with its own curiosities and ain't really got no hopes in the world and like trying to move people, change people, trying to liberate people, that's still good art, right? You know, it still has its merits. But I think if you're going to, if somebody said all the black artists, if you consider yourself a black artist, stand up. If you're gonna stand up, and if you're inviting questions, hey cousin, that's my cousin Stacey. If you're gonna be a black artist, I think there is a intrinsic tie to the liberation, to the happiness, to the betterment, to the rage for, to the happiness for, like, to like, you know, there is something you need to be creating or curating something good, positive, or forward for black folks within that understanding, right? Or your work needs to like be black in a smart way that is not about just selling blackness to other people. In terms of where I think the poem falls down, I think, you know, the poem for me now, I think just stands as a reminder of like, you know, and I think the book as a whole, it has a lot of different feelings about art, right? It's like, and if you read Bluff, right, there's a big part of it, this first 40 pages is like kind of revolves around the question of like, fuck poetry, you know? Like, who cares about poetry when there's stuff to do in the world that, you know, we must move our hands. And then it also gets, you know, but then it's like poetry is not the final answer. But it gets to think about like, I think where I've landed just in my own praxis is this question of like, poetry is not sufficient, right? Poetry is a tool, it is energy, right? Poetry is fuel for the spirit, right? And there is no such thing as movement without energy, right? So in that way, art is a necessary thing for people's spirits. And for myself, I don't think I'm satisfied by like saying like my art is activism, but I hope my art leads to activism, right? And I hope that, you know, the feeling I can call in people is a feeling of both solidarity and dissatisfaction. So, and, you know, and so I think for me, relating that back to like, what is the role of the black artist? The role of the black artist is to care for the black spirit and to widen the dreams and possibilities and ways we remember ourselves and know ourselves and can think about ourselves for black people, right? So we are curators of the black spirit as black artists, right? And that can be no frivolous task. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of weight that we take on, lovingly and cautiously, right? Because it means that now there's a bigger thing behind your work, which should both help you take bigger risk and also caution you to make sure that black people just aren't leaving your work harmed, you know? That black people just aren't leaving your work with more scars, more bullshit on your shoulders, right? It should either unburden them or it should help carry the load, you know? Yeah, and so I think when I read that poem again, I feel myself galvanized to that understanding. And also able, I think having written the book, I'm able to more, I think I sometimes just need to say some shit to be able to live in the nuance of it, right? And so like, you know, I think we gotta do both, right? Like you should be doing good stuff with your work, and then we can have a very real conversation about like, living in capitalism, you know, and making money from your art, and then like maybe being like, okay, like then you should have some questions like, once you start making money from your art, you really got to look at it and start saying like, okay, am I being, because this is what happened to me, right? Because like you go into these college shows and stuff like that, and you're like, I'm getting paid a lot of money to sit around a lot of white people and be this Negro, and while like there might be some use in that in some ways, I need to also protect myself and also not make sure that I'm not just like, hello my baby, hello my honey up here with the racism, but actually like putting them in a spot where they are uncomfortable and not entertained, and then making sure I'm also going to spaces where I'm speaking to my people and that my work is doing what I wanted to do in the book, right? Yeah, that's it. Sorry, that was a very long answer. I can talk about that for a long time. Appreciate you. Any more things? Yeah, what's up?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question for the folks on the live stream was like, how do you navigate sort of the space between identity and artist, right? Sort of like that pressure to, once you like sort of identify as the black artist, right, that everything has to have this gravitas or like maybe this mission, which is different from let's say like somebody who's white, who we imagine white folks to be unburdened by identity, when they're actually lifted by it. Who gets the right sort of without the expectations or right for, of right as an example of this people. Yeah, I think for me, I think there's a tension, maybe not. I think there can be a tension between like I want to be a black artist and like now all my work represents us in some type of way. And I think that if that tension doesn't feel useful, then get rid of it, right? Because I think when I'm doing that work, yeah, and I can feel responsible to it without feeling like I'm the spokesperson. And maybe that's because I know I am, right? And I think it's different, right? Where maybe some differences between us writing now and the days of Langston, right? Where like Langston was one of a few chosen, right? A few selected from a great population, right? But so we know Langston, we know, we know Zora, we know the Rain, we know a couple of folks, right? And like you look at the Harlem Renaissance and like you see like the names that you kind of know, and then you go down the list of like who was writing around them, and you see all these just as equally brilliant, if some doing some really wild, strange stuff that weren't lifted, that weren't then like supported and had careers in that same. Why did I say all that? That you got to make your own stuff happen too. I think also, as an artist, you got to be free enough to also like announce your intentions with shit, and like to redirect yourself with every project, right? Like just because, like let's say, just because like you, I guess, take on like a certain type of work in one project doesn't mean you have to hold true to that in the other, right? Go write about the animals, right? Just to like have that, right? Go write about your animals, and do it lovingly. And if your compass is enough towards that sort of black liberatory or like just like black curatorial, black spiritual working space, the work is gonna bend that way anyway. You could try to, I could try to write about squirrels right now. It's gonna end up being about black people. And or it might not, right? And so I think like as an artist too, you have the freedom to say, I am doing this for my own delight, or I'm doing this for catharsis, right? I just need to get this out, right? Like some people hate that little yellow book over there, homie, right? Some people that's really their joint, but like I know a lot of people who like don't like that book because they don't feel like it's as towards the movement as, let's say, like Don't Call Us Dead, like Bluffers, right? Some books that come around. But I needed to write that book. Don't Call Us Dead was like it was a great book. I'm really proud of it, but it also took so much out of me to like deal with my mortality and black mortality and all this stuff, right? It was, and then to tour that around and be reading these poems, it was heavy, right? And so by the time I was writing poems again after that book, I was ready to write about joy, right? I needed to write about joy because I was like, I just can't write these poems and make me cry no more. Like I need to like go into the pockets of happiness, right? I also had a friend that died at the time, and I was like, I need to mourn. I don't care if y'all don't care about my friend. I need to mourn, right? And then, I could have held the poems for myself. I hold a lot of poems for myself, but then I decided to make like parts of this thing public, right? And there is beauty in being selfish in public, right? Through me writing about my friend who passed away, maybe that helps somebody else who's going through something else, who also has a person who committed suicide, right? Who also is just mourning in some type of way, right? And so there's a way in which, just by the nature of who you are and the spirit behind your work, that even when you're doing the thing about animals, maybe there's just a Negro out there who needs to see you writing about animals to know that he can have that curiosity too, right? Or people bring all kinds of stuff to the poems, right? So people are gonna then read your identity into the work, even if you're not putting it there. So I guess what I'm just saying is write your shit. And then, but just be firm-footed in what and why you're doing it, right? And we don't have to all agree. You know, every artist, we could all get in a circle, and we're never gonna come out unless we're trying to be a collective. We're never gonna walk out of here with a mission statement that all of us feel like our work so neatly aligns into, right? But the way I'm attending to black folks is different than the way you're attending to black folks is different than the way you're attending, right? So we all are gonna do that, right? You know, have one foot in the collectivity and have one foot in what our individual curiosities are as well, right? And that's what makes the diaspora knowledge so rich, is because you're attending to some concerns about collectivity, but also you have these unique, you know, curiosities and delights and noticings that only can come from you, right? Because there's no, you know, even this big question of like the black artist, that's a mini, right? Because there is no one, and there is no ideal that all of us can say like, oh, you're the black artist if you're doing this. But then we all just making the same damn art, right? And so the question becomes, how are you a black artist, right? Like, do you invite the like questions and curiosities of blackness into your work? How does that show up for you? You know, how does that show up for you in times when you're doing work that isn't explicitly black? For me, it's a rhythmic thing, right? Even when I'm not thinking about blackness, the way I move in language is informed by the black folks who I love and who raised me. That's who I love reading and hearing, right? And so, yeah, I think like maybe I'm thinking about two things. One is like strategic blackness, right? When are you black on purpose? What are you trying to do then? In a way, I think that Langston kind of knew as well, right? I think he was probably brave enough to be clear in public if he had wanted to, but he needed to be black because that was the goal they were all trying to push through the method. Get free. That was a side note. But then, you know, there's also like, so that's like black. There are the poems in which he wants us to like be free, feel beautiful, know that our grieving matters, our rage matters, right? All this other kind of stuff that who we are, our hopes and our dreams and our needs matter. And that's like strategic blackness. And then there's like, just like the funk of being black, right? Which is like the jazz poems, maybe, right? Where he's just kind of fucking scattered out of nowhere. I'm gonna read some of them, but it's like, you know, but it's like, that is just black from its spirit, right? There's no like maybe black mission in there, but it is just like him being that, you know? That's a long, long way of saying just do your shit and yeah, just do your work, you know? And yeah, when you know you're doing work that you want to impact people, lean into it, you know? Just really, really lean into it and make sure that the mission is happening. And when you're leaning towards something else, whether it's more peculiar or strange or more niche, whatever, do that also with the same gusto and know that you're not forfeiting anything by attending to your own curiosities, right? That as black artists, it is important for us. Like, shit, who would we be if Octavia Butler wasn't curious about the future and aliens and other worlds, you know? That her sci-fi writing is so necessary to many people's understanding of black everything, you know? And if she would have felt that writing about these made-up, distant, or not-so-distant worlds wasn't going to be serving to black people, we would have missed out on so much richness because that was her clay to really show us ourselves and where we were going, right? So we need black people dreaming and making in every corner of art, right? Because that's the only way that we get somewhere worthy. Okay, woo. Good. All right, church. Let's see. That was an unexpected sermon. All right. I'll read a couple more poems, and then yeah, we'll see if we have any more questions, and then we'll hit the hay. All right. What do I want to do? Should we do the jazz poems? Nah, we talked about them. Cool. Let's do the labor poems. I love these poems. All right. Well, one. Okay, my cousin's in the room. Cousin, don't tell your auntie that I read the poem I'm going to read to you. Okay. But one thing I love about Langston is his um, ability to like, I don't know, he's such a beautiful poet. One of what's the word? Why is it not personification? No, not personification. That's not what I think about. What's the word when you persona? Oh God, there's too many poetry words in my head. Don't tell my students I forgot what a persona poem was for a second. He's such a brilliant poet of persona, but also portraiture, right? And I think two poems that are near and dear to my heart of his um, do portraiture. This first one is a portrait. The second one is a persona poem, taking on somebody else's voice, so giving voice and portraiture to women. I think he does a beautiful job at that. So this poem is one of my favorites of his. That does that work of like also think about labor, but also think about like, yeah, who's the black folks that are not going to be vaulted for how excellent they are, right? Can they have a song too? A song to the Negro washwoman. Oh, washwoman, arms elbow deep in white suds, soul washed clean, clothes washed clean. I have many songs to sing to you if I could find the words. Was it 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock on a winter afternoon? I saw you wringing out the last shirt in Miss White Lady's kitchen. Was it 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock? I don't remember. But I know at 7 one spring morning, you were on Vermont Street with a bundle in your arms, going to wash clothes. And I know I've seen you in a New York subway train in the late afternoon coming home from washing clothes. Yes, I know you, washwoman. I know how you send your children to school, high school, and even college. I know how you work and help your man when times are hard. I know how you build your house up from the wash tub and call it home. And how you raise your churches from white suds for the service of the holy God. And when I've been seeing you singing, and I see you singing, washwoman, out in the backyard garden under apple trees singing, washing white clothes on long lines in the sunshine. And I've seen you in church on a Sunday morning singing, praising your Jesus, because someday you're going to sit on the right hand of the Son and God and forget you ever were a washwoman. And the aching back and the bundles of clothes will be unremembered then. Yes, I've seen you singing. And for you, oh singing washwoman, for you, singing little brown woman, singing strong black woman, singing tall yellow woman, arms deep in white suds, soul clear, clothes clear. For you, I have many songs to make. I could find the words. The second one is, I think, one of his most famous. And I love this one because I think the older you get, the more you realize your parents' sacrifice, right? Yeah, it says it all. Mother to son. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal state. It's had tacks in it, splinters, and boards torn up, in places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, eyes been climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I still going on. I still climbing. Life for me ain't been crystal clear. I think about that poem. I think we read this next one. Stay listening. I have a problem with writing poems my grandma wish I wouldn't write, because they say, yeah, growing up with y'all have families, them niggas is complicated, and so I think one of my grandma, she's a wonderful, courageous, beautiful woman, but she's a woman of few words, a very focused woman. And she, there's things that I think me or my mom would want to know that I don't know if we could ever even ask her the questions. So sometimes I turn to poems to make things fun. Yeah, and so this is a poem. I was thinking about her relationship with my grandfather. God rest his soul, but like many men, was not always the best husband. Yeah, so this is a poem in her voice. And incorporates a lot of silence too. I think like Langston, when he writes Mother to Son, I try to, if I'm already doing the thing of, so like every time it really takes me. If I'm already violated by trying to make words happen to her voice where she has her own, the least I can do is try to be careful. Love poem outside of understanding would begin in selfishness and end in worse commitments. To live near violence is not to own it, nor to be owned, but to belong to it, as the day belongs to the sun. Dawn is a condition of the way you are a condition of. If gravity is what sets the agreement that pulls the earth's face round into light, then, like dawn, whatever stayed me pulled the hand nearer into its daily events. I stayed because I stayed because I had a key, and so kept returning myself to my cage, cleaning it, adding girls, teaching them to love me. I stayed because when his hands rushed to me like comets, anything could happen. I stayed because knew no women who ever left did not want to be the first woman. I stayed because reason has no weight. When I buried him, I cried because I cried because. Woo! Alright. Alrighty. Ooh, that emotionally beat me up. Alright, cool. Let's read a couple more poems and go to a couple more questions. And then I'm gonna go right into some greens. Alright, cool. I think I want to end on these labor poems, just because I really love them, and then I'll end on the last one of mine before we jump back into the Q&A. See if there's any more questions. Yeah. This one? No, I want that one, and I want that one. Here we go. Alright, I just really love these labor poems just because, I don't know, it's a Tuesday or it's a Wednesday night. We all had to go to work today. I'm at work right now. Cool. So some labor poems just to close this out. And then a final poem. Alright. Elevator boy. I got a job now, running an elevator in the Denison Hotel in Jersey. Job ain't no good though. No money around. Jobs are just chances like everything else. Maybe a little luck now, maybe not. Maybe a good job sometimes. Step out the barrel, boy. 2 new suits and a woman to sleep with. Maybe no luck for a long time. Only the elevators going up and down, up and down. Somebody else's shoes to shine, or greasy pots in a dirty kitchen. I've been running this elevator too long. Guess I'll quit now. Yeah. Let's go to steel mills. The mills that grind and grind, that grind out new steel and grind away the lives of men. In the sunset, their stacks are great black silhouettes against the sky. In the dawn, they belch red fire. The mills grinding out new steel. Old men. I wanted to read those two. I love that last one, right? That play at the end, right? There's these factories that produce new steel and old men. Think about guys who work the same job their whole life. Our generation don't really do that no more. You know, your granddaddy, somebody granddaddy used to say, I worked there for 40-some years and that white man still, no. Act like he don't know me. I work holidays back. Okay, sorry. But I think there's something beautiful in that. Langston just looking at men. I love any time where men come up in his work, just because there's that question of his queerness that I think a lot of us wrestle with, or are curious about. I'm not really that curious about it. I'm sure the folks who he was zooming knew that he was zooming them. And so the people who needed to know he was queer knew. And I'm not really that curious. Sometimes I guess there's a desire for a mirror to be there, to see yourself even more fully in an elder. You know, I'm sure if he was born 70 years later, you know, maybe it would have been a different thing. But he was born when he was. And yeah. But I think when I do think about him, I think about him maybe if he did have to hide. You know, the Harlem, maybe he would have to hide. But I think about that current, you know, back then there's a lot of hiding. You know, in the 90s. So I'll end with this poem, which is for my barber, thinking about later. I had like come out first time at 16, right? And then you sort of get to the point where you think you out to everybody. And then I realized I was still in the closet at the barbershop. So this poem is about coming out and being found out by my barber. Who I love a lot. It's after a poem called King of Creation by the great King. This poem is called Day was the last person I came out to. Oh, and then I'll read one more Langston. Day was the last person I came out to. Why did I long to leave the man I wasn't, uncomplicated beneath your blow? In that brief, weekly Mecca, I wanted nothing to mark me with the edge of your shield, cutting horizon above my brow. Our romance of money and years, we trade coins for beauty and peace. In the time rich forever of this shedding place, the million doors to this heaven we attend to be tapered and grown. I didn't want my facts to become the news, nor the closeness it takes a man to square a man into grace, to be soured by desire or gods or traditions that leave my kind unloved, unhoused, unknown by clippers, raggedy and unloved. Day, I wasn't a man. I was your clay, afraid of being banished from your hands. Loose me not from this uncled oasis where I'd rather be misnamed than uncounted. I curved the men I kissed into vague women in that chair, stretched my life so thin you could cut it with a whisper. I knew the world had its sharpened and the crude its jagged disciplines. I knew the world and needed this one place in it, not to be it. But then you found my purpose. And then you cut my hair. Ah. All right, one little Langston poem to top us off, and then the Angel Nafis poem is called King of Creations, Creations with a K. It's the name of her barbershop in New York. She had her high top on. All right, what poem? What page is this poem on? Yeah, it's been uncounted. Yes, exactly, right? You know, when you want to be identified by one group, you know, curtail another part of yourself to fit in, right? And some of us are making that, you know, that's code switching right there, right? We're making those decisions every day. I'm over here and I want to be included. This is who I am, right? We're sort of selectively cutting off ourselves all day. All right, one more. Where's this poem? My count. Oh, it does. Okay. Yeah, I think this is a beautiful one to, yeah, just end us on a beautiful poem. This is My People, and then we'll return to Q&A. My people, dream singers, storytellers, dancers, loud laughers in the hands of fate. My people, dishwashers, elevator boys, ladies' maids, crap shooters, cooks, waiters, jazzers, nurses of babies, loaders of ships, porters, hairdressers, comedians in vaudeville and bandmen in circuses, dream singers all, storytellers all, dancers, God, what dancers, singers, God, what singers, singers and dancers, dancers and laughers. Laughers? Yes. Laughers. 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 Loud mouth laughers in the hands of faith. Thank you. Oh! Oh, this big old chair is nice. I need one of these at every reading. All right. Are there any more comments, concerns? We had our little break in the middle, but anything come up beyond that? Yeah, what's up? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's whoever pleases the system, right? Because you also got to remember that, like, as storied as Langston was, he caught hell. You know, he was blacklisted by McCarthy, right? So he spent a lot of, you know, that, you know, sort of labeled as a communist, followed him for a very long time. And made his career very difficult. He was still black and had that gay rumor following him around too, right? So even, I think now, sort of, you know, we tend to remember folks only like we love them in their passing. But if you look at so many of our black heroes, caught hell in their time. Langston Hughes, James Baldwin caught hell. Maya Angelou caught hell. Poets would play on her name up until the day she died. You know, now she's remembered in a way that makes it feel like, oh, we all loved her when she was living. No, some of y'all are awful to her, right? You know, shoot, look at Martin Luther King. You know, got a whole day from the same government that killed him. Fun fact, if you didn't know, Langston Hughes had a big part in the formation of Martin Luther King. Him and Gil Scott Heron worked a lot with Coretta Scott King. But you know, so that's a long way to say that, like, you know, even, you know, so success in that way, right, doesn't mean that you buddy up to the systems, right? You know, it means that people saw some of your work, right? And that means some people saw something liberatory about it. It probably means that somebody saw something they could make some money off of too. But even underneath the more insidious desires for money means that somebody thought that people would like to read this, right? Which means that for any of us, right, we're all in our circles, right? You might have folks who are making work that, you know, will hit a more general public a lot easier, right? Because of the style of the writing. And then you have, you know, sort of your favorite poet's favorite poet, who maybe is a little bit more skewed, right, a little bit more niche, doing work that is invigorating, right, but might not ever get that same sort of commercial acclaim that the other poet is getting, right? And you know, and then you know, all of us are gonna have homies that are just like, man, like, here's a cat that never had a book, and that was the best writer I knew, you know. I know plenty of cats like that, right? Where I'm just like, I would dream of a day. There are people in my life who I think about starting presses for, right? That I'm just like, if you won't publish a book, if I gotta drag it out of you, I want people to see this, right? So there's always gonna be a mix. Right, and then you have, like, you know, there's some folks who, you know, write their whole lives, never see that acclaim, and then the world sort of catches up to their work, right? After the fact, right? So, you know, I think Judy Jordan is somebody who I can think about having a moment right now, right? Who, she was big in her lifetime, but also because of her political stances, she also, once again, caught hell when she was living, right? And was punished for some of the things she said in support of Palestine, in support of Lebanon, in support of black people. You know, that now, you know, sort of the political day has sort of caught up to her work a little bit. And that happens aesthetically too, right? Where, like, you see folks who are writing 50 years ahead of their time, right? Just in a style that isn't going to really be birthed for a minute, right? But they're kind of ahead of the curve. There's no way to control that, right? I think as an artist, you can, like, I think our job is just to make the work that's most exciting for us. But if you are trying to make a career out of it, right? Like, I know cats who are like, yeah, like, I know some people who are like, this is the books that I write for my commercial work, right? Maybe they do it under pseudonym. I know a lot of really weird poets that are well-selling romance writers, right? And they're like, cool. They don't even write under the same name, but it's like, I get paid for making these housewives feel a tingle in my romance novels, and then I come over here and I write my really weird experimental poetry, right? That I put my name on, because that's the work I'm really proud of. You know, so we're all gonna have to make those demands, right? Like, if part of your goal as a writer is to say, I aspire to a particular kind of commercial success, I ain't gonna knock it, right? But that does mean that you're sort of agreeing to play around within maybe a more limited spectrum of arena of what is possible with how you're making it. And if you just want to say, I want to make my work and I hope you can fuck with it, that's what I think you do, right? Then you just go for it. And you let the people who champion your work champion it. You're still trying, you know, I think you got to make your art worth something to other people if you're sharing it, right? And the people will come, or maybe they won't, right? That is sort of luck of the draw sometimes, or if people feel like they vibing with you, right? And there's no real exact science to it, right? But I think the artist's soul cannot be satisfied by just chasing the first thing, right? Maybe there are people who just like, I just want to write commercial books, and I don't really like writing books, but I like the money. It don't seem worth it. Writing's real hard. Making art is real hard, so I don't really want, you know, I'm not invested in the thing, doing it for the other thing, right? It's nice when that comes along. But yeah, so I think it's just like, yeah, follow whatever your goals are, even if you have multiple goals, right? I think you kind of do all of them, right? If you want to. But yeah, I think, you know, there's somebody comes to mind. There's a writer named Bruce Nugent. He's coming out of the same era. Friends with Langston, maybe not friends, but Bruce was wow, man, wow, queer, and unabashed about it, right? So was writing work at a time when like I read it now and I'm like, this is so exciting. It fits in now. Oh my God, if Bruce Lee was a guy, I think he fit right in, right? But he chose to write that work back then, right? And he didn't curtail himself, and so his work is sometimes a treasure that folks will discover later. But I see the valor in him doing that, right? And saying, I'm going to write the work I must write right now, even if the majority of the people who are in the industry right now aren't ready for this, right? And it might make me niche, but I'm doing the work I want to, right? You know, so you got to answer the question however it works for you, whatever's satisfied, you know. And I think even, you know, in the like, I just really want to make my art. Of course, there's a little human inside that like wants recognition, right? Like my whole book of Bluff is all like fuck these awards and all this other kind of stuff. But like really, that's how kind of how I feel. But there's a little tender boy in me that like really wants somebody to pat him on the head and give him something nice and shiny, you know. If I win a Pulitzer, I ain't gonna say no, you know. Like I'm gonna be like, thank you. This means a lot. Look at me, mama, you know. And I'm a had at, but like that can't be the goal, right? You know. So I think maybe just to reroute the question a little bit. Yes, that's going to happen to us, but I think for yourself as an artist, I think you have to say what is going to be the victory, right? Is success going to be defined by sales, by what you place on the list, by if you get the award, right? There is no way to really control it. You know, you could write what you think is the perfect National Book Award book, and it ain't on the list, you know? So are you going to chase after these things that are about recognition, or are you going to write your work as fiercely as possible, doing what you think the work must do, right? Writing from that sense of urgency and curiosity within yourself that says fuck the money, right? Are you going to do that? And I think that is most often what's rewarding, right? Whether in the big ways of like the shiny things, or in just like you gotta be satisfied with being like, yo, I got like 3 people who like came up to me about my book last time. They laid something on my heart like, right? I got the nice shiny shit. That's cool. That shit run out. Sometimes you just need shiny shit, ain't no money. Right? But like, what really matters to me is like every once in a while I get somebody who comes up to me and is like, the work helped me with a real hard time. You know, I didn't know how I was going to do it, and I read your poems, or it helped me figure this out, or you know, I felt really alone until I read your book, or I felt like I hated myself until I read something of yours, and it helped me release myself. That's the win, right? That's the real win. And if I get a National Book Award, great, you know, but like I can't chase that, right? That's what like I always say like my biggest goal for my work is just like I hope it's useful to somebody, because I feel like I can't really control that, but I can try for that, right, in a more meaningful way. Like that helps you put it to the work. I hope somebody just gets something to somebody. That makes me steer the work in a way where I'm like I'm trying to hand it over to somebody in the way of useful. But I can't trick a judging panel. I can't convince, you know, people to buy enough books. You know, maybe I can, you know, I'm not a marketing director, but like somebody else can convince enough people to buy my book to be on the New York Times bestseller list. I can't be concerned about that, right? So, yeah, and I think that translates to the generational thing too, right? You have no control over it. What we can do then in that community, since sorry, that's a long answer, is like just write your work, be in community with folks, and if community is about anything, folks will point at each other, right, as they rise, right? So you got the homie that maybe gets on a little sooner, they're able to say, hey, y'all need to read my guide, you know? Oh, you like my work? Actually, like, look at my notes section, right? That's after a homegirl of mine. She got 2 books. You ain't read them yet, but you should really go do that, right? And so the networks of artists also feed each other, right? Not to just be so siloed in the individual, right? But like one of the ways I found out when I was first coming up in poetry, one of my favorite things to do was to split to the back to somebody's acknowledgments, right? And to see who the poet was thanking. That's their community, right? So if I really like this poet, maybe I should read the folks that they got blurbs from, because maybe they asked them because they see something of themselves in the book, or these people that are thanking, right? So now I know there's this community of folks, right? And you read enough acknowledgments, sometimes poetry's a small world, right? You start seeing similar names. So I'm like, oh, I see, you know, 3 books I like really thank Terrence Hayes, or were blurred by Terrence Hayes. Who the hell is that, right? Oh shit, Terrence Hayes. Now I'm on his work, right? So yeah, so I think in that way, it's like circles rise together, right? And so support the other artists around you, and just like be in that community. And I think there's a way in which like you know all that sort of stuff about who makes it, who's known, sometimes evens out over time. Sometimes history will like that. And sometimes folks are just like too much of shit, right? Sometimes it's just like, you know what, 100 people read that book, but 100 people know that that's the best book they ever fucking read, And that's also good. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Word. Let's wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Madison, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
thank you. I just want to thank you all also. We can give it up one more time for Danez.
Ooh, I be talking.
And I also want to thank you, Danez, one more time for such an awesome conversation, and those readings were so powerful. I also want to remind you all that Blues in Stereo is here available for purchase, along with a few other of Danez's previous works, including Bluff. Don't buy it on Amazon. Bezos doesn't need any more money. You all know that. Yeah, don't do that. Buy it here today. Support your local bookstore. Also, it's a special opportunity as Danez will be signing copies. So we encourage you to do that, and we hope to see you at another one of our events. Thank you.